Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you also for the invitation to make this presentation. I've been chair of this delegation since the beginning of the term in 2009, and it's the first opportunity I've had to make a presentation to AFET, and so I appreciate this opportunity very, very much. Could I first of all begin by saying, and I'm sure Ms. Helga Schmidt will address this, but I want to welcome the statement made yesterday by the Council on the issue of the Palestinian-Israeli peace process. It is an extremely important restatement of Europe's position. I would draw attention in particular to paragraph 10, where they indicate that they will work with the interim government proposed in the conciliation agreement, and reiterate the position of I think it's paragraph 4, they reiterate the position of the European Union, which was outlined very extensively in December 2009. And I also want to welcome the fact that Baroness Ashton has said that she will now go and try to activate the quartet in terms of responding to the current situation. As already been said, this visit to East Jerusalem and other parts of the West Bank took place in late April. It was a cross-party delegation of the DPLC. We had inevitably discussions with members of the PPLC, which is our primary responsibility. We met all factions of the PPLC. We met NGOs, particularly human rights NGOs that are active in the West Bank and East Jerusalem. And we also had a briefing from OCHA, the United Nations Office for Humanitarian Aid in East Jerusalem. And I would draw members' attention to this very important report here, which is March 2011, a very up-to-date report on the humanitarian concerns in East Jerusalem, which have been identified by the United Nations. Our visit included discussions with well, first of all, we were briefed, I should say, by the heads of delegation in East Jerusalem, who, I have to say, confirmed for us the bleak expectations we had before we left with regard to the situation in the region. Our visit included discussions with families in East Jerusalem and Sheikh Jarrah in particular, who had been evicted by settlers. We visited Hebron, where we visited the sort of flashpoint, the interface between settlers and the local Palestinian population there. We visited the mosque, which is also used by the Jews in the region as a place of worship. Our visit included, as I say, discussions with these families. We also visited Tul Karim, where we met the local non-violent resistance committees. These are a very interesting development in the West Bank, which are mainly of young people who are seeking to divert young people away from the idea of violent reaction to their situation and channeling them into peaceful protest and indeed development of their communities. It is something which I think is very interesting when you consider what is going on in the rest of the region, and that there is this positive development there. We obviously saw the effect that the Israeli security wall is having on the local population as well, where farms are divided, villages are divided, people unilaterally sort of separated from the West Bank into, in fact, in Israel, and vice versa, and the problems that this creates for those with IDs. East Jerusalem, for instance, we met families who, men and women who had married people in the West Bank. but because their spouse in Ramallah didn't have a Jerusalem ID, they could not visit their husband or their wife in East Jerusalem. And if the husband or wife in East Jerusalem chose to live in Ramallah, they would lose their Jerusalem ID. So this kind of constant pressure on Palestinians in East Jerusalem is covered very well in this United Nations report, which I would urge members to read. At the conclusion of our visit, it was the unanimous view of the delegation, and as I say, it was a cross-party delegation, that in view of the US paralysis at that point in the area, certainly the perception amongst the Palestinians we met, and indeed others, that the quartet was essentially dead at that point, that it didn't seem to have any life in it whatsoever, and that the European Union had a critical role to play in trying to kickstart the process, and that it could demonstrate its value as a regional player by taking the kind of positive stance it has in other areas, in Egypt and Tunisia and so on, also in relation to this particular long-standing conflict. It's certainly the view of everybody we met that time is running out, that the constant sort of pressure on the Palestinian population, not just in East Jerusalem, but also in other parts of the West Bank, where more and more Palestinians are being separated by roads which are feeding Israeli settlements. If you look at a map now, compared to and look at where the settlements are located, you will see a whole series of spots, if you like, of enclaves, which are the Palestinian areas, which are not joined in any way except by old roads, which, apart from creating the problems for the local population in terms of getting from A to B, where a 10-minute walk or a 10-minute drive can become a 2-hour drive because of having to go through checkpoints and so on and so forth. There's also the political problem that you no longer have a contiguous Palestinian area. And how do you create a state out of that? How do you create a viable Palestinian state when you have the area broken up in this way? Locals refer to them as Bantustans. I'm simply putting that there as a way in which locals see this. Essentially what's happening, and as I say, everybody who was on the delegation confirmed their view of this, that what's happening is making it virtually impossible, if something is not done quickly, will make it virtually impossible to have a Palestinian state based on the 1967 Green Line. So the question is, what is the alternative? And of course the alternative is a single state. Now, who believes that a single state is viable in terms of having population at odds with each other over a long period of time? In East Jerusalem, one of the issues, and I'm not going to spend a lot of time on the detail of the visit because there's other things I want to draw attention to as well. In East Jerusalem, for instance, the pressure on education is huge. There's a shortage of something like 1,400 classrooms in East Jerusalem, Palestinian classrooms in East Jerusalem. There's a huge underspend in terms of the local authority, which is obviously being run by the Israeli state in East Jerusalem in terms of provision of services. I've mentioned already the problem of settlers, not only in East Jerusalem proper, but also in the old city, which is creating huge flash tension and flashpoints as well. Our visit, however, could be said to have been in two halves. The first couple of days, as I say, it was bleak, pessimistic, and so on. And then in the middle of a meeting we were having on the third day with the PLC, a Hamas member who was present at the meeting interrupted the meeting to announce that a reconciliation agreement had been signed in Cairo to our astonishment, I have to say, because we had just come from a meeting with the Minister for Foreign Affairs, who had indicated there was a meeting going on, but there was no indication that there was going to be a conclusion. There was virtually everybody, I mean all of the PLC who were present from all of the political factions were over the moon that this agreement had been reached. And everywhere we went after that, the questions they had for us all the time was, what would Europe's reaction be to this? Would Europe recognise and work with the new government that has been proposed, the technocrats, the non-party technocrats that are proposed for this new government? Would, when the elections are held, would Europe recognise the outcome and respect the outcome of those elections, or would it do what it did in 2006 and reject the outcome? I have to say our answer had to be that, given our response to what was happening in Egypt and what was happening in Tunisia, that we could not foresee a situation where Europe would not respect the outcome of legitimate elections held fairly and openly. And I hope that I'm right in that, and that Europe will not make the same mistake again. But as I say, that optimism, if you like, that switch in mood was very clear, but it didn't change the conditions on the ground. And as the statement from the Council said yesterday, the process is still paralysed. And I think we have to look at how does Europe assist in trying to unscramble this situation. It is important, I think, the statement that, in my view, the statement made by President Obama last week is an important one. I know there are reservations about him not saying certain things about settlements and so on, but Europe's statement yesterday does. And I think we have to maintain our position that we have to move forward on all the issues, on all the final status issues. It has to be said as well that the Minister of Foreign Affairs that we met, the Palestinian Minister of Foreign Affairs, made it clear to us that while obviously they were hoping to move forward in September at the United Nations with membership of the United Nations, he said to us very clearly and very explicitly that that date was not unchangeable. If serious negotiations were underway on the issue of borders, then that date was movable. And so, I think that's important. No doubt this information has already been conveyed to the parties concerned now, before now. But I think that it's an important indication that there is a degree of flexibility there in terms of trying to move the process forward, because none of the Palestinians we met were of the view that that they could have a peaceful future without negotiation with Israel, and without Israel also having a secure future for itself. But they also pleaded with us to bear in mind that Palestinians also need security, that they can't live in a situation where at any moment they can be bombed. I mean, it's a two-way process, and that peace has to be based on mutual respect and mutual security. And I think that this is certainly something that we need to bear in mind. I have to say as well that I note from an Agence, I've just finished now, I have to say that I note from an Agence France report that a Palestinian leader, a Fatah leader, has said they do not intend to move towards unilateral declaration of independence. Now, there may be a difference between that and seeking membership of the United Nations, but that's a matter which we have to. Could I just conclude by saying that I think, by saying two things. There's lots of other things we could say, but there's two things I think. I think, first of all, I think it would be important in the current circumstances that the Parliament have a mechanism for keeping track of what's going on. My suggestion is, and I haven't discussed this with Hans-Gert Pottering or anybody else, but the suggestion that perhaps AFET might consider mandating the Middle East Working Group to have a watching brief and a report back to AFET and the Parliament. But I think also it would be important that the Parliament itself have a debate on this, on the peace process now, on the Middle East peace process specifically. I know there are wider issues, but I think on this particular issue, I think it would be very important for members of the Parliament to get an opportunity to debate it, perhaps approve a resolution stating what our position is now, and hopefully that would strengthen the hand of Europe in the negotiations within the Quartet and with the United States, and indeed with the Palestinians and with Israel. Thank you very much.
So, to